This is Matt Wujciak, CCW Digital writer and analyst, here with the legendary Wall Street Journal and New York Times best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and arguably one of the most influential customer experience and customer service keynote speakers in the world, Shep Hyken. Today, we'll be talking about the current state of the customer experience landscape in a post-pandemic world. Shep, how are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Thanks for having me here today.
Thanks so much for hopping on our podcast series. I know last time we spoke was in Nashville. Obviously, the event series is undergoing some surgical reconstruction, and we've adapted to a more online presence as of lately. But we're looking forward to seeing you guys and some of the guest speakers in person as soon as we can.
I can't wait because it's not only have I not been on a plane in a few months, but my wife is starting to complain. I don't think we've been together this long since I've known you. I think that is a complaint. It's time to go back to work, she says. No, actually, we work every day. We do virtual presentations, we do interviews, podcasts, that type of thing. And I think I'm doing more of that than I've ever done in my entire life. So the world is adopting to, I think, a temporary situation where we can't travel as much and be in large conferences as much. But I believe that's not only coming back, but I believe while we're at it, what we've done over the last few months has been adapted and adopted and will continue to be used at a much greater rate. So I think that we're going to see communication at all levels, both in person as well as what's now being referred to as a Zoom call, whether it's a Zoom, a Skype, or any other Microsoft Teams call. It's like right. Zoom's become like, hey, give me a Kleenex when you want a tissue. It's like, hey, let's do a Zoom call when we just want to see each other or talk to each other via the internet.
Exactly. And Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and some of these remote technologies truly are some of the few winners that are coming out of this pandemic as we're all starting to rely on this technology. And Shep, I know you've been doing a lot more than you traditionally were. Not that I'm saying you weren't, but I've been following a lot of your work lately, and you've been absolutely pumping out content. And one quote that I found the other day that I actually want to highlight, Shep, you were recently quoted saying, "You can have the greatest product in the world, but if you don't back it up with a good experience, especially the people experience and the support experience, it doesn't matter how good the product is. Your
Boom.
Customer will go somewhere else to find something comparable because they like to be treated better." So I guess, Shep, with call volumes increasing and many brands struggling, whether it be a contact center solution provider, certainly not the remote technologies that we just talked about, obviously, but it could be a retailer, it could be a business across a plethora of different industries. My questions for you, my main question is, why does the customer experience really matter now more than ever before?
Well, there's a couple of things. Whenever you're in a crisis mode, in this particular case, it's been the pandemic and COVID-19, the personality of a company becomes magnified. It's like they're put under a magnifying glass. The good becomes more obvious that it's good to do business with them. The struggles become higher and bigger struggles. You know, companies that are in industries that are recognized for not having the best service already, and I'm not going to say what industries those are. It's not fair to do to them, but I'll just say that if they were struggling in their support world before, they struggled even more as customers were making more and more calls. So here's an interesting stat that came from, let's see if I can find the source on it, but it was basically, it said that there's a greater percentage of people today are reaching out to customer support more than they would normally. So this was, the human connection is more important than ever during COVID-19. So let's see, it's somewhere around 38% of US respondents and 39% in the UK stated that having the opportunity to speak to a live agent is a make or break factor to having a successful customer service interaction. Think about that. And furthermore, more than 25% of respondents were disappointed by a brand that didn't offer the human-to-human option. And that comes from the 2020 CGS Customer Services Preferences in Times of Distress report that was recently released by CGS.
Call volume is certainly increasing, and customers demand speaking to a live agent, especially the more important that the inquiry is. They're turning to the voice channel rather than a chatbot, SMS, social media, an automated email notification. If someone is looking to get a product return, or there was a delay in a shipping, they want to talk to a live agent. And that's something that's certainly so important now more than ever. And the customer service landscape continues to evolve, right? Like, people are finally demanding the respect from analysts as an imperative department, oftentimes similar to a sales or marketing strategy, especially with the more metrics that we have to kind of aggregate the data for the people who are calling those more important inquiries on the voice channel, whether it's automated or personal, whatever it might be. We're having more customer lifetime value metrics, more customer retention metrics. Why is that entire process of customer service, whether we're talking about the technologies, the metrics, or the empathetic dialogues that the agents are ultimately coached to talk to a customer with, why is that so important to retaining customers?
So the concept of retaining customers is obvious. You want to retain them. It's less expensive to keep the existing customer than to keep, marketing and selling and using whatever means necessary to bring in one new customer. You have to understand what your churn rate is, your retention rate, which it's kind of like the yin and yang of each other. When you know your churn rate, you know your retention rate, or vice versa. And you want to know all types of numbers beyond just customer satisfaction to understand the importance of delivering good service. You want to know what happens when you have a repeat customer. What is that lifetime value? You mentioned lifetime value, but what does the repeat customer spend, and what differently from in terms of a one-time customer? When you start to understand what these customers are worth, it makes a lot of sense to invest in the right places to scale out your service. So whether you're using technology, whether it's face-to-face or voice-to-voice or whatever you want to call it, I think you've got an opportunity to create an emotional connection, even with the digital experience. How does Amazon, when you never talk to a customer service rep, typically create the emotional experience? They do it through the confidence in the system. I know that the moment I hit, purchase, I'm going to get an email that immediately says, I've made my purchase. I know I'm going to get an email when it says that it's shipped. I know I'm going to get an email that tells me when I'm going to get it. And a lot of times I get a picture of the package sitting outside of my door because I wasn't at home to get it, or my office to get it. So I know it's arrived. These are very automated processes that completely, that give me the confidence I need to say, I want to do business with them again. Now, if I need to talk to somebody, and you can talk to somebody at Amazon, they have an interesting system of getting you there, but it's really well done. But if in a typical business, if I want to talk to somebody, I want to pick up the phone, I want to make the call. I don't want to wait on hold for an extended period of time. I just recently did a study that we looked at, I guess, well over 1,000 consumers, and we wanted to know what were the trigger points for getting them to leave. And one of them was long hold times. And how many times are you willing to sit on hold for an extended period of time before you decide you want to switch brands? And a good percentage of them said one time is all this company gets. If I have to walk off or hang up or whatever because of a long hold time, I'm not going to. And I don't understand why companies today, even major companies, and I'm not going to tell you any of the brands, but I experienced this myself. I called one of the companies I do business with, and they said, hold times are longer than usual. We are sorry. We value you. 40 minutes later, I was still on hold. They didn't use the technology to tell me how long my hold would be or give me the option for them to call me back at a predetermined, agreeable time. So I don't understand, with it, as inexpensive as that is. And by the way, if you go to CCW, you will walk through the exhibit hall and you will find the companies that offer this exact technology I'm talking about. There's no excuse to make that customer stay on hold, not knowing how long they're going to have to wait. Now, I know I'm going off on this. The other thing I want to talk about is scaling up. Today, more than ever before, especially as everybody was forced to work from home, we now know that we can remotely scale up as necessary. There are plenty of vendors out there in our industry that will allow us to buy licenses to their software by the seat. So if normally we have 300 people in our support center and we need to bump it to 400, or maybe we just have 3 people and we want to bump it to 4, we can buy that extra seat as needed. Drop off when we don't need it. No excuse not to be able to scale up and bring it back. We just have to make sure we have the right people on the bus train them properly, get them hired and train them properly, and then get them out there to do the good job that they're supposed to do.
No, you're absolutely right. It certainly is a combination of hiring the right people, hiring the right amount of people, and then incorporating the right technologies that you talked about that are on some of these floors in the CCW exhibit hall that people are marketing and people are selling. And then you mentioned the other component of the majority of consumers today will switch brands and directly put money in the pockets of competitors after receiving a bad customer experience, just one, maybe even two times. And I think you coined that phrase known as serial switchers. A lot of them will then turn to online reviews and social media, and they'll voice their complaints. That really dictates how they're going to respond to some of these inquiries or some of these reviews. And that does have a lot to do with their digital marketing strategy, which is interesting to me because customer service and marketing, there's so many different correlations today. I guess my next question for you, Shep, is why are social media reviews and online forums, whether it's Yelp, Reddit, even Twitter, LinkedIn, why are these so important for customers and businesses alike today?
Sure. By the way, I don't believe it was me that created the term serial switchers. I used it. Lots of people use it. I'd like to think I invented it, but I'm sure I wasn't that smart. Anyway, here's the thing about online reviews of any kind or descriptions and testimonials. This is what customers are looking at when they're making purchases. Not all customers. And by the way, we did those same 1,000 consumers that we asked, what's going to trigger you to move on. I asked them, in the last year, did you leave a review? General. Number one, was it negative? So that's a yes or no. And if they said yes, was it a negative review, a positive review, or did you leave both? And I thought that's interesting. I was surprised. It was less than 10% of the people left a negative review when something negative happened. But the point is, something negative does happen. And obviously, something positive would happen that many people left reviews as well. But I was really wondering about that negative. Here's the thing. Nobody is perfect, so it's expected that if a company has X number of reviews, there's going to be somebody that didn't say we were perfect. On a scale of 1 to 5, Northwestern University did a study, and they said 4.2 to 4.4 is a very credible score that says, well, 5.0 might be unrealistic, and maybe somebody's trying to game the system. And obviously something less than 4.2 might make a person pause and say, I wonder if I should buy this product. But people generally expect there's going to be, perfection isn't reality. There's going to be somebody out there that might not like them. So that's fine. But the key about online is it is online. It's public. And one of my good friends, Jay Bear, has a great expression. He says, when it comes to social media reviews, it makes customer service a spectator sport. And that means everybody gets to watch and see how well a company responds to a negative review. And by the way, they see how they respond to positive reviews as well. My feeling is a company should respond to virtually every review, even if it's nothing more than to give a thank you or a thumbs up. And if there's a negative review, they need to actually show that they're doing something about it. In the perfect world, the customer who's thinking about doing business with you will see the complete interaction in the form of, negative review is stated, company comes on to acknowledge it, asks if they can go offline and fix it. Once it's fixed, company comes back on and says, thank you for letting us take care of you. And in the perfect world, then that customer comes back and says, boy, am I glad I reached out. And the point is they did reach out. They reached out in a public forum, which it would have been nice if they did it direct to start with. But hey, this gives an opportunity for what could be a PR crisis or a nightmare to become a PR dream.
Absolutely. And online reviews, and whether it's handled by a digital marketing team or a customer service team, there's a lot of different metrics that support the conversion rates to sales. And online sales and customer volume is booming in e-commerce right now, both of them, the volume piece and the sales. And online sales grew nearly 50% at the peak of the pandemic as consumers stayed home but continued to shop. They continued to read different online reviews. They continued to spend their money, even if their salaries were getting reduced, whatever that might mean for different consumers. But consumer behavior trends continue to shift towards this digital environment, even as many more stores begin to reopen. Shep, can you talk to me a little bit more about the blend between a digital and brick and mortar customer experience? Some people might have kiosks where people come in store, they're wearing masks, they're wearing gloves, they order basically online yet in the store. It makes for a seamless customer experience. There's a lot of different brands experimenting with blending that digital, online, and offline customer experience.
Right. Well, one of the benefits that happened in the most recent crisis that we've all been involved in is the adoption or adaption, depending upon how you look at it, of existing technologies was thrown 3 to 5 years into the future. And what I'm trying to say is that we would have eventually gotten around to a lot of what we're using now that we didn't use much of before at
Absolutely.
the level we're using now, but it might not have been for another few years. So we're moving at high speed into this, and we're trying new things. And that includes, perhaps putting a kiosk in as part of the experience in an actual store, having, different, processes, if you will, to purchase. Now, today, there's certain rules and guidelines, if you will, that dictate how we interact with each other on a face-to-face level. You mentioned masks, perhaps rubber gloves. We go into a store. If I decide I want to try something on, do they put that garment back on the rack, or do they take it in the back and let it sit there? And do they have some type of a disinfecting process? Maybe it's just letting it sit there for 24 hours or 48 hours before they put it back on the rack. But there's different processes that companies are going through. And I think what everything is driving toward is to make the customer feel safe and secure and comfortable. And on top of that, let's add the word, make it easy for the customer at the same time. Because some of these, I don't know, for lack of a better term, obstacles that have popped up, not being able for you to see my whole facial expression when we're together because I have a mask on, may lend itself to an opportunity to do something different, or we may have to do something a little bit with a little more effort to make that customer feel that there's the connection. The bottom line is we want customers to find that the process of doing business with us is easy. We care about them enough to keep them safe and healthy and out of harm's way. And when you need us, we're there for you. If it's digital, we do it in such a way that creates confidence. If it's personal, human to human, we do it in such a way where the empathy creates a connection.
Yep, absolutely, Shep. And when we don't find the right balance of these personalized face-to-face connections, or we don't necessarily utilize the right technologies and find that optimal balance to create the most efficient, best-in-class customer experience, we find ourselves encountering more and more of these serial switchers, for whoever coined that term. And we've talked about it before in the past, in the previous podcasts and throughout some of our content, but I love that concept of serial switchers. And just to kind of go back on it a little bit, one study that you previously had talked about indicated that the number of estimated serial switchers is somewhere around 75 billion in lost revenue annually. In other words, customers now compare us to the best customer experience they've ever had if they're not receiving some of those empathetic practices or the most optimal and frictionless technologies. And they're not necessarily comparing us to our competitors, but it's the Amazons, it's the Ubers, the Nikes, some of the brands that you've famously talked about. And those serial switchers will switch after, again, just one or two bad interactions. Can you share a story where you encountered this, either consulting for a brand, or you saw it walking around on the street, where you saw a real live serial switcher and experienced it from a personal example where someone was unsatisfied with this experience and said, I'm never doing business with this company again?
New Voice Media is the $75 billion number, and that was from about 2 years ago. And they talked about serial switchers and how basically, and I mentioned this actually in one of the speeches I did when I keynoted at CCW, that because of this, you've got to recognize $75 billion may be lost, but guess what that means? Somewhere, somebody did it right and took the customer took that, whatever the customer switched to, they're making part of that 75 billion. So we can't forget that, can we? No, not at all. So that's the point. And I think that as far as true life examples, wow. I'm a walking example of somebody that was so frustrated with one of the companies that I did business with that I said, I've had enough. And I switched. And it had to do with long hold times, bad information. In other words, getting different stories from different reps every single time I called. And I finally said, enough is enough. What's it going to take for me to just move over to the competition? And I did it. And I look back and I say, you know, that wasn't a bad thing. It worked. So gosh, and here's another point you made. We're no longer compared to direct competition. So our customers that we have are smarter than ever before, because starting back in the 80s, companies started to promote that they were great at customer service. Specifically, they were winning an award called the Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award. This came out about in the 80s, maybe early 90s. And they said, we won this quality award, so try us out. I remember FedEx won it, Ritz-Carlton won it, Cadillac won it. So these are all brands that you would associate with really good experiences. And over time, J.D. Power started getting involved, and now there's all these J.D. Power awards, and you see ads on TV which show, does anybody even watch the ads on TV? Don't we speed through those when we're watching TV now because it's always on demand? Anyway, I digress. But you see, an image of the brand with, 5 J.D. Power awards in front of it. We are teaching our customers that we have great customer service. Come in and try us. And guess what we're doing? The rock stars that are doing this are setting the benchmark higher for everyone else, because now the customer goes to another business and says, why can't they be as good as the people who I did business with at, and just name the great business that, whatever it was, whether they've won an award or not. Our customers benchmark us with great service and great people from anywhere, not just the companies and the competitors that we're doing business with.
Absolutely, and certainly some great examples there, and especially as layoffs continue week by week and consumers have less money to ultimately spend on different brands, the customer experience continues to get more important than ever. We really have to be able to compete with not just our competitors, but ultimately the best customer experience that customer has ever had. Shep, that's all the time we have for now on this episode with the CCW Digital Podcast on the state of customer experience after the pandemic and in a post-pandemic society. Shep, thanks so much for jumping on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to chat. I can't wait for the next time, and I hope to see you sooner than later.
Absolutely, Shep.